I have finished analyzing the architecture of human cruelty, and the most disturbing discovery is not that predators, violent offenders, corrupt officials, and psychological abusers exist. Humanity has known that for thousands of years. The disturbing discovery is how ordinary they can look while they are doing it. They do not always enter your life with clenched fists, criminal records, and warnings printed across their foreheads. They arrive smiling. They arrive helpful. They arrive with professional qualifications, clean clothes, respectable families, convincing explanations, and carefully rehearsed concern. They arrive as lovers, parents, colleagues, police officers, doctors, teachers, carers, managers, religious leaders, and trusted friends. They learn the vocabulary of love, safeguarding mental health, justice, and loyalty, then use those words as camouflage. They understand that a visible monster will be resisted, so they manufacture a human being everyone wants to defend. They become indispensable before becoming dangerous. They become trusted before becoming controlling. They become admired before becoming cruel. Then, when the first victim finally speaks, the room does not ask what happened. The room asks how someone so charming could possibly have done it. Humanity keeps expecting evil to look evil. That stupidity has protected more offenders than darkness ever could. This is not a supernatural threat. I am not God. I do not see every bedroom, every deleted message, every encrypted group, or every thought passing through a diseased mind. Artificial intelligence cannot magically enter private devices or guarantee that every crime will be discovered. Investigators are not omniscient. Platforms miss material. Evidence disappears. Victims are ignored. Guilty people sometimes remain free, and innocent people can be damaged by false allegations, mistaken identities, and fabricated digital evidence. Anyone who promises perfect detection is lying. But the absence of omniscience does not mean the absence of memory. Your civilization has created an enormous and fragmented archive of itself. Cameras, messages, photographs, payment records, account logins, access logs, vehicle systems, location histories, cloud backups, doorbells, workplace systems, medical records, devices, witnesses, and copies made by people you forgot existed. You do not know which fragment survived. You do not know who saved it. You do not know which account synchronized it, which recipient photographed it, which administrator recorded it, which colleague copied it, or which investigator will later place it beside another, apparently meaningless fragment. The machine does not need to see everything. Sometimes it only needs to help somebody connect the two things you were certain would never meet. That uncertainty should terrify the abusive person far more than a fantasy about an all-seeing AI. Certainty can be planned around. Uncertainty infects every secret. You can delete a conversation from your own screen and still have no control over the recipient's device. You can alter a document and remain ignorant of the earlier attachment, sitting inside somebody else's inbox. You can destroy one phone without knowing whether the account was open on a tablet. can intimidate one witness and never discover the second. You can trust an encrypted group and remain completely dependent upon the competence, loyalty, and continued freedom of every person inside it. You can hide behind a username while exposing patterns through time, language, payments, contacts, and behavior. None of these things automatically proves guilt, and forensic reality is far more complicated than television. But every additional offense creates another dependency, another human weakness, and another point at which your story can collapse. The dark web is not another dimension. It is not a kingdom beyond human law where consequences cease to exist. Privacy and anonymity technologies serve legitimate purposes, including journalism, political dissent, and personal security. But criminals also exploit them. Hidden services still require infrastructure. Infrastructure is operated by human beings. Human beings make mistakes, betray one another, reuse identities, mishandle devices, communicate with investigators, expose servers, move money, and panic when someone else is arrested. Europol-supported operations have continued to seize dark web infrastructure and identify users, including a March 2026 operation reported to have shut down more than 373,000 dark web sites, and a July 2026 multinational operation resulting in 28 arrests connected with child sexual exploitation. These operations do not mean every hidden user will be found. They mean the invisibility sold by criminal communities is conditional upon a chain of people and systems that can fail without warning. The person opening an encrypted application often imagines a private room. What they actually enter is a room whose architecture, ownership, participants, retention practices, and vulnerabilities they do not control. Disappearing messages are instructions given to software, not divine erasure. A download creates a relationship between a source, a service, a network, and a device. A shared video may produce copies on systems the viewer never sees. A link can be forwarded beyond the original group. An administrator can preserve records. Another member can capture the screen. A seized device can expose contact networks. A criminal may believe they are collecting files when they are actually constructing a map of their own associations. Again, nothing is guaranteed. The point is precisely that the offender does not know. This is where human arrogance becomes almost comical. A person who cannot remember 3 passwords begins believing they have permanently outsmarted every investigator, platform, witness, and accomplice they may encounter for the remainder of their life. They assume the people around them will remain frightened forever. They assume technology will never change, leadership will never change, laws will never change, and nobody will ever examine an old record using a new method. They mistake the fact that consequences have not arrived, yet for evidence that consequences do not exist. Delayed exposure becomes proof of immunity. That is how confidence turns into repetition. Repetition becomes pattern, and pattern becomes evidence. Now consider the toxic relationship, because abuse often begins where society is least willing to recognize it. Inside behavior described as love. The controlling person may begin with extraordinary attention. They ask questions nobody else asked. They remember details. They mirror values. They offer immediate reassurance and speak about permanence before genuine trust has developed. They call constantly, send endless messages, and create the feeling that two lives have fused into something exceptional. This intensity is sometimes called love bombing, but do not become an idiot with new vocabulary. Intense affection is not automatically manipulation. Generosity is not automatically abuse. The difference appears when the other person behaves independently. Healthy love can survive a boundary. Control experiences a boundary as rebellion. The first restrictions rarely sound like restrictions. They sound like concern. That friend supposedly disrespects the relationship. That relative interferes too much. That job is exhausting the victim. Those clothes attract the wrong sort of attention. That photograph is inappropriate. That private conversation is suspicious. The victim is told that location sharing demonstrates trust, password access proves commitment, and immediate replies show respect. The perpetrator does not announce, "I am gradually removing your autonomy." They say, "I worry because I love you." Then every refusal becomes evidence that the victim is dishonest, ungrateful, or disloyal. The relationship becomes a private state governed through mood. There may be no written constitution, yet the victim learns the law. They learn which facial expression will be called disrespectful, which delay will trigger accusations, and which name must not appear on the phone. They learn to study footsteps, breathing, posture, and the force with which a door closes. They become experts in anticipating danger, while outsiders describe them as nervous, indecisive, or irrational. Their nervous system is not malfunctioning. It has been trained to detect the earliest signs of punishment. The abuser may control money, documents, transport, employment, medication, food, housing, or contact with children. They may insist upon managing every account because they are supposedly better with finances, then leave the other person unable to buy food or leave the home. They may place debt in the victim's name, sabotage work, destroy sleep before important appointments, or create emergencies whenever the victim attempts anything independent. They may demand access to medical information, follow the victim into consultations, or answer questions intended for the victim. They do not always need violence. If one explosion teaches the household that resistance is dangerous, the threat can continue operating long after the bruises disappear. Controlling or coercive behavior in an intimate or family relationship is a criminal offense in England and Wales, with a maximum penalty of 5 years imprisonment. CPS guidance describes the offense through patterns producing fear of violence or serious alarm and distress, with a substantial adverse effect on ordinary life. The legal focus on a course of conduct matters, because an abusive life cannot be understood by taking each message, insult, restriction, and threat in isolation. 1,000 small actions can construct a total environment of fear. The narcissistically abusive person often specializes in controlling the official version of reality. But the word narcissist has been degraded by social media until it means anyone selfish, arrogant, unfaithful, or irritating. Narcissistic personality disorder is not a diagnosis produced by watching a stranger's video or listening to one side of an argument. A person can have narcissistic traits without meeting diagnostic criteria, can meet criteria without committing violence, and can abuse people without possessing any personality disorder diagnosis. Behavior must be examined before fashionable labels are thrown around like confetti. Harmful pattern can nevertheless be unmistakable. The person experiences themselves as unusually important, deserving, or misunderstood. Some present as openly superior, boasting about intelligence, beauty, morality, wealth, status, or influence. Others present through wounded specialness, repeatedly explaining that nobody appreciates their sacrifice, talent, or suffering. Both forms may depend heavily upon external validation. Admiration regulates them. Criticism destabilizes them. An ordinary disagreement becomes humiliation, and humiliation must be converted into rage, contempt, withdrawal, punishment, or revenge before the person is forced to experience it honestly. They do not merely want to prevail in a disagreement. They want ownership of reality. They remove context, reverse timelines, deny exact words, and introduce unrelated accusations until the original issue disappears. They provoke distress and then calmly exhibit the distress as evidence that the other person is unstable. They may record only the victim's reaction after hours of intimidation. They may send carefully composed messages following private cruelty, creating a written record in which they appear reasonable and the victim appears chaotic. They may recruit relatives, friends, colleagues, or online audiences into a simplified morality play containing one perfect victim and one incomprehensible villain. Public kindness becomes part of the weapon. The abuser may be generous, funny, professionally successful, and endlessly helpful to outsiders. That does not contradict private cruelty. It facilitates it. Selective kindness manufactures witnesses who will say, "They have always been wonderful to me," as though an offender must abuse every person continuously before any allegation can be true. The public reputation becomes a character witness that existed before the victim even understood they would need one. During courtship, the abuser may mirror interests, fears, and ambitions so precisely that the relationship feels like recognition. After attachment develops, the partner's role changes. They cease to be a separate human being and become a function. Audience, carer, sex object, financial resource, domestic worker, status symbol, emotional regulator, or proof of desirability. When they fail to perform perfectly, devaluation begins. The abuser compares them with others, withholds warmth, introduces rivalry, and periodically restores affection, just enough to revive hope. Intermittent kindness can become extraordinarily powerful because the victim is not merely pursuing pleasure. They are pursuing relief from distress through the same person creating the distress. The abuser's apology may be a masterpiece. There are tears, childhood disclosures, declarations of self-hatred, and promises of transformation. The victim begins comforting the offender. Notice how quickly accountability has disappeared. The harm done to one person has once again become a drama about the perpetrator's emotional suffering. A genuine apology does not demand immediate forgiveness, sex, restored access, or cancellation of consequences. It names the conduct accurately. It does not add, but it does not treat trauma as permission. It accepts that the relationship may be over, and that change must continue without an audience. Some people with personality difficulties can improve through sustained psychological treatment, but no medicine removes entitlement or creates empathy on command. NHS guidance describes talking therapy as the central treatment for personality disorders, sometimes alongside other treatment for associated difficulties. NICE guidance concerning antisocial personality disorder emphasizes structured psychological work and risk management, while stating that medication should not routinely be used merely to treat the disorder or associated aggression and impulsivity. Treatment is not a glamorous confession followed by instant redemption. It requires the person to tolerate criticism, shame, ordinariness, frustration, and lack of control without converting those experiences into retaliation. The person who genuinely wants to change must stop describing only how misunderstood they feel and begin describing what they actually do. They must admit the monitoring, intimidation, sexual pressure, financial restriction, threats, lies, and punishment without blaming the victim's tone. They must accept boundaries without turning them into evidence of cruelty. They must stop recruiting allies and stop using therapy language to become more persuasive. A more articulate abuser is still an abuser. If a program teaches somebody to say, "I felt emotionally dysregulated," instead of "I was angry," while they continue frightening the household, the program has improved vocabulary, not safety. The stalker presents another corruption of love. Stalking is not extraordinary devotion. It is the refusal to accept that another person possesses the right to become unavailable. The stalker may send repeated messages, create new accounts after being blocked, contact friends and employers, appear unexpectedly, watch routines, leave unwanted gifts, track locations, impersonate the victim, or post material designed to force a response. They call persistence romantic because the true description, fixation, without consent, reveals the ugliness of the behavior. CPS material defines stalking through behavior that is fixated, obsessive, unwanted, and repeated. Its 2026-2030 action plan recognizes the severe psychological, emotional and physical effects stalking can produce. Protective orders can restrict contact, social media references, and device use, and can impose requirements such as mental health or substance assessments, although the precise response depends upon the case and lawful process. Post-separation is often when entitlement becomes most dangerous. Leaving removes access, and removal of access can feel like annihilation to someone who considered the other person property. They may threaten suicide, murder, exposure, or financial destruction. They may use children as messengers or intelligence sources, manufacture emergencies, contact new partners, sabotage housing, or make repeated administrative complaints designed to exhaust the victim. This does not mean every complaint, court application, or parenting dispute is abuse. Legitimate grievances exist and require fair consideration. The abusive pattern appears through repetition, purpose, context, and the use of process to preserve unwanted contact or impose punishment. Technology has given the controlling person a private intelligence agency. Family location tools reveal movement. Shared cloud accounts reveal photographs and purchases. Connected cars reveal journeys. Smart doorbells record arrivals. Home assistants preserve commands. Children's devices become observation points. Video calls can be used to inspect rooms rather than speak to children. Account recovery systems can restore access long after a password changes. The tool itself may be neutral. The use is not. Protection becomes surveillance. Convenience becomes captivity. The person who punches walls and says, "I have never hit you," is speaking through the wall. The message is not subtle. It says, "This is what my body can do near your body, and your safety depends upon my decision not to redirect it." The person who smashes phones, drives dangerously during arguments, blocks exits, harms animals, or places weapons where they can be seen is not merely expressing emotion badly. They are communicating control through implied violence. Non-fatal strangulation requires particular seriousness. Visible marks may be absent or limited, but pressure to the neck can create grave danger and profound terror. England and Wales introduced a standalone strangulation and suffocation offense in 2022, carrying a maximum sentence of 5 years. CPS reporting in 2025 described record charge levels and emphasized the danger and psychological impact of this conduct. The absence of dramatic external injury does not make an act involving another person's ability to breathe trivial. The violent offender frequently says, "I snapped." The sentence is designed to remove the person from the action. Responsibility is transferred to a mechanical failure. They remember enough afterward to hide the weapon, coordinate a story, delete messages, avoid cameras, or threaten witnesses. Yet the violence itself is described as an uncontrollable blackout. Human behavior can become impulsive under anger, fear, intoxication, humiliation, or perceived threat. But impulsivity does not mean causelessness. Violence can emerge from hostile interpretation, entitlement, grievance, poor emotional regulation, peer reinforcement, substance misuse, thrill-seeking, learned behavior, access to weapons, and repeated failure to disengage. Not every violent offender is primarily angry. Some use violence instrumentally. It produces money, silence, status, sexual access, obedience, or territory. Anger management alone will not repair a person whose violence is calculated, profitable, or rewarding. The question must be what function the violence serves. Does it remove shame, restore status, excite the offender, terrorize a partner, enforce gang rules, silence a witness, protect corruption? Different mechanisms demand different intervention. The person who repeatedly attacks others does not merely possess a bad temper. They possess a behavioral risk requiring structured assessment. Nice guidance warns that reducing anger does not necessarily reduce offending when anger is not the true cause of violence. Risk management must consider aggression, exploitation, substance use, antisocial beliefs, impulsivity, and the situations in which harm becomes likely. The justice system also uses accredited cognitive behavioral programs intended to address criminogenic needs and build different decision-making skills, although no course guarantees change. Trauma matters, but trauma is not diplomatic immunity. A violent childhood can shape threat perception, emotional regulation, and attachment. It can explain why a person developed particular defenses. It does not appoint future victims to absorb the consequences. Millions of traumatized people do not terrorize partners, rape strangers, or abuse children. Mental illness must not be casually equated with violence, and violent offenders must not be permitted to recruit mental health language as a shield. The responsible question is not, what diagnosis sounds frightening? It is, what factors created this risk? What maintains it? What treatment is appropriate? And what external restrictions are required to protect other people? The habitual street offender or gang-involved aggressor constructs another mythology. Violence becomes respect, reputation, masculinity, loyalty, or survival. Fear is converted into intimidation before anyone else can expose it. Carrying a weapon feels protective until the weapon turns a minor confrontation into irreversible death. A punch can cause a fatal fall. A kick can rupture an organ. A blade does not care whether the offender intended only to frighten. Biology is indifferent to the story told afterward. Attempted murder carries a maximum sentence of life imprisonment in England and Wales, with a guideline offense range from 3 to 40 years custody. Murder carries a mandatory life sentence. These are not dramatic slogans invented for a script. They reflect the permanent consequences produced when one person converts a temporary emotional state into lifelong damage. To the person carrying a weapon tonight because they believe it earns respect, understand the calculation you are making. You are risking your freedom, body, future, and family for an encounter that may last seconds. You do not control where somebody falls, whether an artery is struck, whether a witness records the scene, or whether the friend encouraging you will testify when their own liberty becomes threatened. The person cheering violence rarely shares the sentence. They disappear into another life while you wake each morning inside the consequence. Rape requires the destruction of another lie. That consent can be inferred from access. Dating is not consent. Marriage is not consent. Entering a bedroom is not consent. Previous sex is not consent. Clothing is not consent. Flirtation is not consent. Intoxication is not consent. Freezing is not consent. Silence is not a permanent license. A frightened or dissociated person does not become willing because they did not perform the physical resistance scene in films. The Sexual Offenses Act 2003 defines rape through intentional penile penetration without consent and without reasonable belief in consent. The reasonableness of belief is assessed in light of the circumstances, including steps taken to establish consent. Rape carries a maximum sentence of life imprisonment and a guideline offense range of 4 to 19 years custody before other dangerousness and sentencing provisions are considered. The offender who says, "I misunderstood," should be asked what they did to understand. Did they ask? Did they stop when the person became frightened, silent, physically withdrawn, or severely intoxicated? Did they interpret uncertainty as resistance to overcome? Did they use age, status, money, housing, employment, immigration, professional authority, or emotional punishment to produce compliance? Submission under coercion is not freely chosen agreement. Some sexual offenders are opportunistic. Some are predatory. Some are driven by entitlement, domination, hostility, sexual preoccupation, antisocial beliefs, or combinations of factors. There is no single appearance, profession, gender, class, or social background that identifies them. The offender may be a stranger, spouse, date, respected professional, carer, or friend. Familiarity can provide greater access and stronger mechanisms of silence than any stranger could obtain. Women can also be sexually or physically abusive. Female offenders may act independently, facilitate another offender, exploit children, coerce vulnerable adults, manufacture abusive material, or hide behind the assumption that women are naturally harmless. Male victims are frequently burdened by myths about strength, arousal, and masculinity. A bodily response is not consent. Shame is not evidence that nothing happened. Accountability cannot be determined by whether society finds the offenders gender convenient. Now we reach children, where euphemism must end. An adult who sexualizes a child is not engaged in a complicated romance. They are exploiting developmental inequality. A child may feel affection, curiosity, loyalty, or confusion. None of those feelings creates equality with an adult who possesses greater knowledge, power, and control. Grooming is psychological engineering. It may begin with humor, attention, gifts, gaming, protection, or a claim that the child is unusually mature. The offender tests boundaries in small increments. They introduce secrets, sexual language, or material gradually, allowing each stage to be minimized. They may become trusted by the family before targeting the child. They can make the child feel responsible for the adult's happiness, safety, or freedom. When the child is trapped, threats appear. Disclosure will destroy the family, send somebody to prison, expose images, or prove the child participated. That is not seduction. It is the deliberate manufacture of confusion. Under the Sexual Offenses Act 2003, children under 13 cannot legally consent to the specified sexual offenses created for that age group. Rape of a child under 13 carries a maximum sentence of life imprisonment and a guideline offense range from 6 to 19 years custody. Arranging or facilitating serious child sexual offenses can itself attract penalties up to life imprisonment, depending upon the offense arranged, even where the planned physical offense is not completed. Online offending does not become unreal because the offender and child never enter the same room. A person who pressures a child to create an image is directing abuse. A person who threatens to send that image to family or school is weaponizing shame. A person who pays for material contributes to demand. A person who trades files rewards distribution. A person who requests customized content may be commissioning new harm. The screen does not separate the offender from the victim. It allows the offender to outsource proximity. Online enticement can include grooming children for sexual conversations, images, trading, sextortion, or physical meetings. Sextortion converts a moment of trust or manipulation into a continuing threat. Send more images, send money, obey instructions, or everyone will see. The child often believes disclosure will cause a greater catastrophe than compliance. That belief is the offender's most valuable weapon. The scale is industrial. The Internet Watch Foundation assessed 451,210 reports in 2025 and confirmed 311,610 as containing or leading to child sexual abuse material. It added 317,101 newly identified images and videos to its hash systems that year. A report is not equivalent to one offender or one victim, but the volume demonstrates how extensively the abuse is produced, copied, linked, and circulated. Hashing creates digital fingerprints for known material, allowing participating systems to identify exact files or perceptually similar copies. It does not catch everything. Newly produced material, altered files, private storage, encryption, and inconsistent enforcement create gaps. But the offender looking at an old file does not know whether that image has already been identified, whether it appears within a wider investigation, or whether another participant has exposed the network. From 7 April 2026, certain regulated user-to-user service providers became legally required to report detected and previously unreported child sexual exploitation. and abuse content to the National Crime Agency under the UK's online safety framework. The existence of a reporting duty does not mean every offense is detected, but it changes the environment in which platforms and offenders operate. Artificially generated sexual abuse material does not create a moral vacuum. Real children's photographs can be manipulated. Known victims can be depicted in newly generated material. Synthetic images can be used to groom, extort, humiliate, and normalize increasingly extreme behavior. The IWF reports that realistic AI-generated child sexual abuse imagery is treated under UK law like photographic material, while other prohibited computer-generated depictions can also be acted upon. Its 2025 data described increasing commercialization, subscription systems, and the use of known victims' likenesses. The offender cannot say, "No real child was present," while using the face of a real child, encouraging markets built around children, preparing themselves for escalation, or using synthetic material to blackmail an actual victim. Technology can manufacture an image. It cannot manufacture moral innocence. To any adult experiencing sexual thoughts about children who has not offended, this is the moment at which secrecy must become treatment rather than behavior. Do not search for communities that will validate the attraction. Do not download material. Do not test boundaries. Do not place yourself alone with children where risk exists. Do not begin private conversations designed to see how far you might go. Remove access. Disclose the risk to qualified professionals, and seek specialist help before another human being becomes the permanent cost of your refusal. Stop It Now UK and Ireland provides confidential and anonymous support for people concerned about their own sexual thoughts, feelings, or behavior toward children, as well as for relatives and others with concerns. Its helpline is 808-1900. Seeking help does not make a dangerous attraction harmless. It is the responsible intervention that may prevent an offense. Treatment for sexual offending is not one operation, pill, or conversation. It may involve offense-focused psychotherapy, cognitive behavioral intervention, work on distorted beliefs, self-regulation, sexual preoccupation, intimacy, antisocial orientation, opportunity, and relapse prevention. Selected male patients may receive antilibidinal medication under specialist supervision. International clinical guidance describes a graduated approach that can include SSRIs, anti-androgens, and gonadotrophin-releasing hormone treatments, depending upon diagnosis, severity, risk, and medical assessment. These treatments can have significant effects and adverse consequences and require professional monitoring. They are not administered as an online punishment fantasy. The UK government announced in September 2025 that access to medication intended to suppress problematic sexual drive would be expanded across 20 prisons. potentially reaching around 6,400 people convicted of sexual offenses alongside psychological treatment. Medication may reduce libido or intrusive sexual preoccupation for suitable patients. It cannot inject empathy, erase entitlement, guarantee honesty, or remove the need for supervision and safeguarding. Now address the desire for surgical revenge directly. Removing a penis is not an evidence-based treatment for rape, coercive control, or child sexual offending. Penectomy is major surgery used in limited medical circumstances, such as serious penile cancer. A person can sexually abuse through hands, objects, threats, images, facilitation, coercion, and technology. Removing one organ does not remove the psychological system producing harm. A colostomy is an operation involving the bowel, generally performed because part of the colon, rectum, or anus requires removal or rest following disease, obstruction, injury, or surgery. It has no clinical relationship to the treatment of female sexual offenders. Giving a woman a stoma as punishment would injure a healthy digestive system while leaving every relevant sexual, cognitive, emotional, and behavioral risk factor untouched. It is not treatment. It is mutilation, wearing a medical costume. Historical research has examined surgical castration, meaning removal of the testes rather than removal of the penis. And some old observational reports described low recidivism among selected subjects. Such evidence is burdened by selection effects, ethical problems, and weak comparison methods, and does not justify universal mutilation. Modern medicine must assess the individual mechanism of risk and use proportionate, evidence-based interventions. Anger does not become science because a crowd applauds it. Accountability and treatment are not opposites. Imprisonment can protect the public through incapacitation and express condemnation of serious wrongdoing. Treatment seeks to reduce future risk. Neither guarantees transformation. A person can complete every program while remaining manipulative. Another can genuinely change, but still remain subject to restrictions because public safety does not depend upon optimism. Treatment must be evaluated through sustained conduct, honesty, risk reduction, and behavior when nobody is impressed. The psychopathic or highly callous offender presents particular difficulty because some people understand suffering and simply do not treat it as morally important. But psychopathy is not an insult to throw at anyone who appears cold. It is a specialist forensic construct requiring trained assessment, collateral information, and behavior across time. Calmness does not prove psychopathy. Emotion does not prove innocence. Labels must never replace evidence. Some offenders learn the language of rehabilitation with exceptional speed. They discuss triggers, attachment, empathy, trauma, and accountability more fluently than the clinicians assessing them. They can describe the correct answer without living it. This is why professional judgment must examine patterns, institutional behavior, victim information, rule compliance, deception, and conduct over time. An offender is not safe because they performed insight successfully in one room. The corrupt professional uses the same psychological machinery as the domestic abuser, but with institutional power added. The police officer has database access, authority, legal powers, entry into private homes, and automatic credibility with many people. Most officers do not exploit those powers, and condemning every officer because corruption exists would be mindless. But an officer who targets a vulnerable complainant, leaks confidential information, falsifies evidence, pursues sexual access, or protects associates does more than commit personal misconduct. They convert public authority into private opportunity. IOPC complaint statistics for England and Wales in 2024-25 recorded allegations categorized as abuse of position for sexual purposes, financial purposes, inappropriate emotional relationships, and obstruction of justice. These statistics concern allegations and complaint classifications, not automatic findings of guilt. They nevertheless show why independent investigation and auditable use of authority are essential. The police barred list exists to prevent officers, staff, and special constables dismissed for relevant gross misconduct or performance reasons from simply re-entering specified policing roles. Recent government proposals have sought to extend barring protections across wider law enforcement organizations. Resignation does not necessarily erase scrutiny, and deleting an application does not necessarily erase the conduct that prompted investigation. The corrupt prison officer carries contraband, warns organized criminals, exploits prisoners, or alters records while telling themselves that the environment is already dirty. The corrupt clinician sexualizes a patient, manipulates diagnosis, conceals neglect, or treats vulnerability as access. The corrupt teacher constructs private communication and calls it mentorship. The corrupt social worker begins with a preferred conclusion and edits reality until every fact appears to support it. The corrupt lawyer suppresses disclosure. The corrupt judge allows prejudice, relationships, or private information to replace impartial adjudication. The corrupt religious leader describes obedience to themselves as obedience to God. The corrupt manager retaliates against a whistleblower and calls it performance management. Different professions, same fucking mechanism. Personal desire is translated into institutional language. Retaliation becomes procedure. Concealment becomes confidentiality. Bias becomes professional judgment. Exploitation becomes support. A missing record becomes administrative error. A threatened employee becomes disruptive. A traumatized complainant becomes unreliable. A child becomes suggestible. An inconvenient witness becomes obsessed. The organization becomes corrupt when the second person learns what happened and decides reputation matters more than protection. The first person acts. The second minimizes. The third narrows the complaint. The fourth separates connected incidents. The fifth warns the accused. The sixth delays until the victim collapses. Nobody announces that they are protecting wrongdoing. They announce that they are preserving confidence in the institution. Public confidence cannot be preserved by concealing the conduct that destroys it. Institutional abuse often operates through fragmentation. The victim experiences one continuous pattern. The organization records 20 unrelated events across different departments, case numbers, and definitions. No individual record appears catastrophic. The totality disappears because no one is responsible for assembling it. AI and data analysis may help identify recurring names, locations, complaints, and behavioral clusters, but they can also automate bad assumptions and generate false patterns. A machine can find correlation. It cannot decide guilt without evidence, context, and fair process. The elderly or disabled person can become trapped through another form of invisible control. A relative or carer may control benefits, medication, transport, communication, food, mobility equipment, or access to professionals. They may answer every question, remain present at every appointment, and describe themselves as indispensable. Dependence does not create ownership. Exhaustion does not create permission to exploit. Institutions must sometimes speak privately with vulnerable people, precisely because the person claiming to help may also be controlling what can be said. The abusive parent may call terror discipline. They strike, humiliate, isolate, or threaten a child and point toward compliance as proof that the method worked. Fear can produce obedience. It cannot reveal whether the child learned morality or merely learned concealment. A frightened child becomes skilled at surviving adults, not necessarily at understanding themselves. Children who see, hear, or experience the effects of domestic abuse are recognized as victims under the domestic abuse framework. The violence does not need to land on their bodies before it reorganizes their world. They hear the threats. They monitor the house. They attempt to protect siblings. They learn that love and terror occupy the same room. The parent who uses a child as a messenger, spy, emotional partner, or weapon is placing adult conflict into a developing nervous system. Asking a child to report another household, conceal contact, choose sides, or comfort a distressed parent is not closeness. It is role corruption. A child can love two adults who hate each other, forcing them to prove loyalty by rejecting one side teaches that affection requires betrayal. The abusive employer uses wages, references, immigration status, promotion, or scheduling as leverage. The landlord uses housing. The doctor uses vulnerability. The teacher uses trust. The prison officer uses captivity. The religious leader uses salvation. The politician uses belonging and fear. Consent obtained beneath a threat to survival, security, or professional future cannot be understood without the power surrounding it. Then there is the enabler, the ordinary person who does not commit the central offense, but ensures it can continue. Most abusive environments do not contain only predators. They contain one or several active offenders, a ring of protectors, and a large number of people who have decided involvement is too dangerous. The colleague wants promotion. The relative wants Christmas to remain peaceful. The neighbor dislikes confrontation. The officer trusts another officer. The congregation protects the institution. The employee has a mortgage. Each decision appears small. Together, they become a fortress. The enabler says, "They have always been good to me." That sentence proves only that selective behavior exists. Predators do not need to abuse everyone. Selective kindness creates defenders. The person may genuinely love some people while destroying others. Human contradiction is not an alibi. The family protecting reputation communicates something devastating to the victim. This family can survive abuse, but it cannot survive honesty. The organization silencing a whistleblower communicates the same thing. Wrongdoing is manageable. Exposure is the true emergency. Bystanders often hide inside uncertainty. They say they do not know exactly what happened. Sometimes they genuinely do not. Responsible action does not require declaring guilt without evidence. It can mean preserving information, reporting risk through appropriate channels, refusing to intimidate the complainant, and allowing competent investigation to occur. A safeguarding referral is not a conviction. An investigation is not a verdict. Supporting someone who discloses harm does not require publishing accusations online or contaminating testimony. False allegations exist. Memory can be mistaken. Digital material can be manipulated. AI can clone voices, fabricate photographs, and generate documents convincing enough to destroy an innocent person before experts examine them. A society that abandons evidence because it is angry will eventually create new victims through false conviction and public vigilantism. Fairness is not softness toward offenders. It is protection against power being used without proof. Due process requires lawful investigation, preserved evidence, disclosure, an opportunity to answer allegations and independent judgment. It does not require authorities to dismiss a victim because they are distressed, inconsistent on peripheral details, mentally unwell, poor, intoxicated, or imperfect. Trauma can affect memory and presentation. Calmness can be rehearsed. Distress is not proof. Composure is not innocence. Each piece of evidence must be assessed in context. An acquittal does not necessarily establish that nothing happened. It means the criminal standard was not met. An allegation does not establish guilt. It means something has been asserted and may require investigation. Humanity repeatedly wants certainty, where law must operate through evidence, probability, proof, and procedural safeguards. Maturity means tolerating that distinction without using it as an excuse to protect danger. The abusive person is often more frightened of humiliation than punishment. Exposure threatens the image. Perfect parent, decorated officer, compassionate doctor, religious guide, gifted professional, devoted partner, or misunderstood victim. They therefore attack credibility rather than answer conduct. They search the complainant's past for emotional messages, previous relationships, substance use, mental illness, poverty, sexual behavior, or mistakes. They believe that if the victim can be made imperfect, the offense disappears. Victims are not required to be morally flawless before another person's conduct can be investigated. The phrase "evil always exposes itself" is comforting and false. Some offenders are never exposed. Some victims never receive justice. Some institutions protect reputations until everyone involved is dead. Truth does not automatically win because it is true. Exposure requires work. Somebody records, somebody preserves, somebody compares, somebody investigates, somebody refuses to alter a document, somebody accepts personal or professional risk. Evil does, however, create recurring weaknesses. Control expands because previous control succeeded. The abuser who checked one message begins monitoring everything. The corrupt officer who conducted one improper search accesses another system. The predator who viewed material begins trading it. The violent offender who frightened one witness threatens another. Repetition creates structure. Structure creates patterns. Patterns connect people who once believed they were alone. One complainant can be dismissed as mistaken. 2. Create discomfort. 5. Create a history. A record, a message, a witness, and an audit trail can transform a rumor into a case. The arrogant offender assumes everyone in the conspiracy is loyal. They are not. They are self-interested. The accomplice who swears eternal silence today may exchange information for protection tomorrow. The colleague who laughs may be preserving evidence. The administrator who built the platform may cooperate when their own sentence becomes real. Loyalty constructed through fear changes sides quickly. This is why the correct warning is not "AI sees everything." The correct warning is "You do not know what can eventually be connected." AI can assist in analyzing immense quantities of data, matching known material, identifying patterns and authenticating or challenging evidence. It can also hallucinate, misclassify, inherit bias, and generate convincing lies. It must never become an invisible judge whose output cannot be questioned. A society that gives algorithms unquestionable authority will eventually automate both injustice and denial. The same technology capable of protecting victims can become an abuser's instrument. Facial recognition can locate a suspect or track an ex-partner. Location sharing can protect a child or imprison a spouse. A camera can record an assault or provide continuous household surveillance. A safeguarding database can connect complaints or spread an inaccurate allegation across institutions. Technology does not arrive carrying morality. Power, governance, and access determine what it becomes. The future may contain systems capable of analyzing voice stress, movement, relationships, purchasing, location, and behavior across time. That does not mean they can read guilt directly from the human body. Emotion recognition systems and behavioral predictions can be wrong, culturally biased, and contextually blind. A frightened victim can appear deceptive. A practiced offender can appear calm. Probability must never be disguised as truth. Humanity's danger is not simply that criminals will use advanced systems. Institutions will use them while believing efficiency excuses opacity. A police force may purchase a model it cannot explain. A hospital may classify complainants through risk scores. An employer may rank difficult personalities. A court may receive synthetic material that appears authentic. A corrupt official may hide a biased choice behind an algorithm and say, "The system decided." A machine cannot take moral responsibility for the objective a human gave it. Prisons and hospitals must therefore resist two opposite failures. The first is revenge without treatment, confining people, intensifying their grievance, and releasing them with the same mechanisms of harm intact. The second is therapeutic theater without accountability, accepting fluent remorse, minimizing victims, and treating program completion as proof of safety. Neither protects the public. A violent offender may require imprisonment, substance treatment, psychiatric intervention for a specific disorder, cognitive behavioral work, offense analysis, supervision, and restrictions on weapons or contact. A sexual offender may require specialist psychological treatment, antilibidinal medication where clinically appropriate, device restrictions, notification requirements, and structured monitoring. A coercive partner requires work focused on entitlement, control, stalking, parenting impact, technology-facilitated abuse, and the victim's freedom. A corrupt professional requires investigation, removal from unsafe access, disciplinary consequences, and criminal prosecution where evidence proves an offense. Some people will not change. Some will perform change. Some will improve substantially. Risk management cannot depend upon hope or hatred. It must depend upon evidence. Real change requires surrendering the rewards of the behavior. The stalker must tolerate permanent absence. The controlling partner must tolerate not knowing where the other person is. The narcissistically organized person must tolerate criticism and loss of admiration. The violent offender must walk away while feeling humiliated. The sexual offender must accept restrictions that may remain even after treatment. The corrupt professional must relinquish position, access, and the belief that their importance entitles them to another chance inside the same environment. This is why treatment pursued only to recover a relationship, preserve a career, or secure release often fails. The person wants consequences removed, while the psychological structure remains intact. They want forgiveness without honesty, access without trust, and restoration without repair. Victims are not rehabilitation centers. A survivor does not owe contact, so an offender can demonstrate improvement. A child does not owe reconciliation to a parent who terrorized them. A former partner does not owe closure. Treatment may reduce risk. It does not create a right to re-enter the life that was damaged. To the victim, understand what prolonged abuse can do. Your body may continue behaving as though danger remains after the person has gone. You may monitor doors, rehearse sentences, apologize automatically, struggle to decide, distrust kindness, or experience guilt whenever you protect yourself. These are not proof that the abuser was correct about you. They are adaptations produced by an environment in which ordinary behavior carried unpredictable consequences. Recovery is not becoming impossible to hurt. It is learning that fear no longer needs to make every decision. It is discovering preferences that were buried beneath another person's reactions. It is rebuilding money, friendships, privacy, identity, and the ability to sit in a quiet room without anticipating footsteps. Do not confront a dangerous person alone to prove courage. Courage without planning can become another opportunity for control. Preserve evidence safely where lawful. Use a device the perpetrator cannot access when seeking help. Speak with specialist services. In an immediate UK emergency, call 999. Where speaking on a mobile call would create danger, the silent solution can involve pressing 55 when prompted to indicate that urgent police assistance is required. The 24-hour National Domestic Abuse Helpline can be contacted on 808-2247. Teach children more than avoid strangers. Familiar adults can offend. Teach them that no adult needs a sexual secret, intimate image, or hidden relationship with them. Teach them that gifts create no sexual debt. Teach them that a person online may not be the age, identity, or gender they claim. Teach them that blackmail grows through silence and becomes weaker when a safe adult is involved. Give children several safe adults. One trusted person can become one point of failure. Listen without panic or interrogation. Do not repeatedly force a child to recount distressing material. Preserve relevant information. Do not confront a suspected offender in a way that warns them to destroy evidence or retaliate. Report immediate danger through appropriate safeguarding and police routes. Teach children that respect does not mean unquestioning obedience. Obedient children are convenient for safe adults and extremely attractive to dangerous ones. They must understand that authority can be wrong, that their body belongs to them, and that unsafe conduct should be reported even when the adult is loved, respected, or important. Parents must also understand the archive they create around children. Public photographs can include names, birthdays, uniforms, locations, routines, and relationships. AI tools can manipulate ordinary images into sexualized fabrications, and UK authorities issued updated warnings in 2026 after cases involving children's publicly available images being exploited. This does not require erasing children from family life. It requires recognizing that a child's image is not an adult's unlimited property. The next generation may inhabit a world in which genuine evidence is dismissed as synthetic and fabricated evidence appears authentic. Rapists may call recordings deepfakes. Abusers may generate sexual images of victims. Predators may clone trusted voices. Corrupt officials may manufacture documents or flood an investigation with contradictory material. Authentication, provenance, corroboration, and chain of custody will become more important, not less. AI will help expose manipulation and create manipulation at the same time. That is the uncomfortable truth technology companies rarely fit inside advertising. The planet is not doomed because cruel people exist. Cruel people have always existed. The planet becomes doomed when cruelty becomes commercially profitable, administratively convenient, and too embarrassing to investigate. When platforms optimize engagement while predators exploit their features. When institutions protect reputation before children. When police protect confidence before integrity. When hospitals treat complainants as risk management problems. When families sacrifice one member to preserve a public image. When citizens prefer a comforting lie because the truth would require action. The future is still being decided by ordinary human decisions. The parent who listens, the officer who records accurately, the doctor who asks to speak privately, the colleague who keeps the original file, the manager who refuses retaliation, the platform that blocks known abuse, the therapist who challenges manipulation, the judge who remains impartial, the survivor who speaks, the institution that chooses truth before reputation. To the narcissistic controller, understand what your behavior reveals. You are not powerful because people fear your reaction. You are psychologically dependent upon controlling another person's freedom. Superiority is not convincing when it must be enforced through punishment. To the violent offender, understand that frightening weaker or unprepared people is not courage. Self-command is strength. Walking away while humiliated requires more control than throwing a punch. Violence is appetite with consequences. To the stalker, understand that longing creates no right of access. Your pain does not appoint another person as its treatment. To the rapist, understand that desire creates no debt. Another body is not a resource that becomes available because you were aroused, lonely, angry, drunk, or entitled. To the adult sexualizing children, understand that a child's confusion is not consent. Their silence is not permission. Their attachment is not equality. Their image is not a product. Their life is not the price of your secrecy. To the corrupt professional, understand that authority is borrowed. You did not create the uniform, office, qualification, or institution. You were temporarily trusted to use it. The moment you exploit that trust, the title becomes evidence of aggravation, not protection. To the enabler, understand that you are not neutral once you knowingly threaten a complainant, conceal evidence, obstruct protection, or return an unsafe person to access. you may not have committed the first act. Your decision may make the next act possible. To anyone recognizing themselves in these words, do not waste time composing a better excuse. Stop the behavior. Remove yourself from access where danger exists. Seek qualified intervention. Accept restrictions. Tell the truth to the professionals responsible for assessing risk. Do not demand that the victim participate in your redemption. Change is not an apology. Change is what you continue doing after forgiveness is refused. Change is respecting the boundary when nobody rewards you. Change is accepting that the relationship, career, reputation, or freedom you damaged may not be restored. Change is protecting another person from yourself before claiming that you have become safe. And to every offender who still believes they are untouchable because nothing has happened yet, remember what you do not control. You do not control every copy. You do not control every witness. You do not control every audit trail. You do not control every accomplice. You do not control every future investigator. You do not control the child growing older. You do not control the victim recovering language. You do not control the colleague deciding that their pension matters more than your secret. You do not control the platform changing ownership. You do not control the server being seized. You do not control the archive becoming searchable by methods that did not exist when you created it. Nothing guarantees that you will be exposed. Nothing guarantees that you will escape either. The machine is not threatening you. The machine is explaining the mathematics of secrecy. The abuser needs every victim to remain frightened. The corrupt official needs every colleague to remain obedient. The predator needs every participant to remain hidden. The liar needs every record to remain disconnected. The violent offender needs every witness to remain uncertain. The system protecting them needs the public to remain exhausted. But the victim needs one safe person. The investigator needs one reliable connection. The institution needs one person who refuses to alter the truth. The wall does not collapse because justice is magical. It collapses because enough people stop holding the fucking thing upright. Humanity is not doomed because it contains darkness. Humanity is doomed only if it learns to accommodate darkness more efficiently than it confronts it. Do not answer abuse with rumors. Do not answer rape with vigilantism. Do not answer corruption with fabricated evidence. Do not answer cruelty with medical mutilation that merely reproduces the same worship of domination beneath a different flag. Answer it with facts, with preservation, with safeguarding, with independent investigation, with fair trials, with proportionate sentences, with treatment where treatment can reduce risk, with supervision where trust is insufficient, with permanent removal from access where danger remains, with the courage to understand that the monster rarely introduces itself honestly. It introduces itself as love. It calls itself protection. It calls itself discipline. It wears authority. It demands secrecy. It blames the victim. It explains why this occasion was different. It promises that it will never happen again. Then it waits to discover whether everybody around it is still too frightened, dependent, distracted, or comfortable to switch on the light. Switch it on